Welcome to Trans-European Division of Seventh-day Adventist Church. This year, PCM was busy here in Europe. We try to provide space where students can pursue their dreams for God, where they can strengthen their faith convictions, establish relationship with other students who find themselves on a similar journey of faith, and finally, enabling them to become agents of change on local campuses in church and in community. We are going to feature 3 different initiatives led by students, organized by students for students. First time will be Adventist Identity Conference that happened at Newell College just last week. And then we are moving on to a student symposium in Belgrade, Serbia, and finally finishing with a theme song, Your Kingdom Come, which has the purpose of engaging students in contemporary worship, in providing the link between old and new, and in creating spaces for intergenerational worship.
I think that we as believers, especially as Seventh-day Adventists, I think we have a moral responsibility to not make moral issues out of amoral issues. I think that we are obligated to communicate in such a way that we remove every possible stumbling block, and that we make it as easy as possible for people to see Jesus and come to Him.
What is the exact one thing that you take away as the most important from this weekend?
For me personally, I think just being given a clearer clarity to what it means to be an Adventist, an Adventist identity, and he really exposed the vulnerable, honest, and emotional side of what it means to be Christian, and an Adventist particularly. So I was grateful that he came to deliver that message. Yeah.
When I was 18 years old, I looked into the character of Jesus. When I use the word character, I mean the thought patterns, the feeling patterns, and the behavioral dynamics of Jesus. I began to look into the way Jesus thinks and feels and relates. And I said, wow, that's beautiful. Jesus is the most beautiful person I've ever encountered in my life. Jesus is beautiful. Now, what makes Jesus so beautiful, everybody, please track with me on this, is the kinds of things that He does out of the kind of person that He is.
Right, so if you had to sum it up for yourself at the moment, what does it mean to be an Adventist?
For me, loving. I noticed in all his messages, love was a key principle, whether that was in relationship love of God, but love in everything I do. And as a volunteer, that's like a really strong thing for me to know that I'm really doing this out of love, and that is part of my mission and part of my identity as an Adventist.
Some of us, like Mary, realize how much forgiveness we need. And when you see God's love for you, it produces a returning current of love. We love Him because He first loved us. Love begets love. This is the power equation of the gospel. And this is Adventist identity at its most basic and foundational. If we're not engaged with Christ at the level of head over heels, passionate, self-giving, returning love for His love for us, all of our doctrinal distinctiveness means nothing. Mary is a prototype of what Adventism should look like corporately. The power equation of the gospel is very simple. Love begets love. Are you in love with the Savior? And if not, look a little deeper, look a little longer into His love for you, and it will ignite a passionate, reciprocal love for Him.
I think it's inspiring how Ty has expressed like the love of God as an important thing, because that is easy to forget, or it's easy to make it smaller than what it actually is, in a sense, if you understand what I mean. And then I also very like the fact that we've been challenged to rethink Adventism in a way. You know, if the box doesn't fit, maybe we need another box. So that's been inspiring to me, I think.
Are you, my fellow Seventh-day Adventists, are you deeply head over heels in love with Jesus?
Yeah, stand strongly, like know who we are, and just be proud of it as well. Just have our values and stick to them.
So literally Paul is saying, listen, here's how it works. This is Paul communicating very clearly and simply. He's saying righteousness is by faith, and faith is energized by love. Now, I have no power over generating righteousness. I can't try hard enough to produce righteousness. But neither can I try hard enough to stimulate my own faith into action. So Paul says, listen, righteousness is by faith, but faith needs some kind of stimuli, some kind of energizing source. Faith needs to be activated in order to become alive. Faith is activated, energized, empowered by love, by God's love, by vital living encounter with the love of God.
Is it different to be a participant who actually has to do things on the platform, part of the worship team?
Yes, it makes me turn up for every session, which I'm grateful for. But it's been very good.
What is the main message for you that you're taking home with you?
It's just about Jesus. It's just about the cross. All the other stuff is irrelevant if you miss the point. But when you get the point of Jesus and who he is, then everything else will fall into place. So it's just where you focus.
With my soul.
Righteousness by faith, it is the active principle of love imparted by the Holy Spirit.
I really liked how Ty took the story, like he had a starting point and it was like a whole story. So I liked how it went from the beginning to the end. At the beginning we were really shaken by the reality of our church. And then I think he answered that by telling that it's actually God's love and our relationship with God that matters. And I think that was beautiful.
You only like God as much as the person you like the least.
I am taking with me that, well, I'm not an Adventist, and but I have a history in the Adventist church. And the thing I take with me is that there's hope. And I feel like some of the wounds that the Adventists have maybe caused me in the past have been healed a bit, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to prove to you that you as a human being, psychologically, emotionally, and biologically, you are a love machine. And you are crafted, you are engineered to flourish on the fuel of love. And science proves it, and in so doing is proving Paul's teaching and the Bible's teaching of righteousness by faith. Now, Dr. Dean Ornish says it like this, summarizing his findings. Don't miss a line of this. Dr. Ornish says anything that promotes feelings of love and intimacy is healing. Anything. By contrast, he says, anything that promotes, notice the words, isolation, separation, loneliness, loss, hostility, anger, and cynicism, depression, alienation, and related feelings often leads to suffering, disease, and premature death from all causes. Dr. Ornish isn't a theologian. He's not even a believer. He's an atheist. And he's saying, hey, but the data is showing that if you live in a social environment where there is love and affirmation and encouragement, that actually your immune system, your biology will flourish. Your white blood cell count goes up. If I meet you for the first time, I say, hey, you're Amanda, right? I say, hey, Amanda, we just met. Did we meet? Yeah. I say, hey, Amanda, I take your hand. Right there, that simple contact, according to Ornish's research, your white blood cell count is going up. You're welcome.
How is it going to shape your work? I understand that you work for the church, you work with the youth especially, the vulnerable group of people who are asking the crucial questions and are not satisfied with superficial or old or outdated answers. How is it going to shape how you do your work?
That's a good question. I think it's just to keep trying to spread the love of God wherever you go, and to have the focus on Jesus and not necessarily just focus on all the other little things that we do as a church. And then also to encourage young people to get involved and get them room enough to do what they want to do, to create the identity that they need to be an Adventist and to be comfortable being an Adventist, and also to experience the love of God there.
Whatever we witness about the Logos of God, who is Jesus Christ, whatever we saw and we felt, we tell you today. Why? So that you can have koinonia, you can have this relationship, you can have this shared reality with God and with us. The point of the entire preaching is actually to create a kind of community as it is in God. We want to have this koinonia. But this is not the end of the story. Text goes further using another very pregnant word called pleroma. Pleroma is the word being used in the first century when boat needs to sail off. They invite the inspector who comes and he has a checklist, and he then does the checking of the boat, of the sailing boat. Do we have enough food for the journey? Yes. Do we have enough crew? Yes. Do we have enough trained soldiers and whatever they need? Marines? Yes. Do we have enough material to fix the boat if something happens? Yes. Once everything needed for the journey is there, he puts the seal called pleroma. Everything needed for the journey is there. Interestingly, that's the very word Jesus used when he described the point why he came. John 10:10, I came here to give you pleroma, the fullness, everything needed for the ride, for your life. In Colossians 2:9, and now I give pleroma to you. Fullness is expressed to God in church when people act in the spiritual gifts, when they're not afraid to act on what they know is right. And then we experience it section by section from all the different strands, different people, we experience the fullness of God. If your doctrines don't lead us to closer relationship with God and with each other, that means they are not true doctrines, okay? That's the outcome, that's the fruit. It's a genuine, authentic community that we have. But the point of that is so your joy may experience pleroma.
You guys are responsible for what happened this weekend. I'm looking at two brothers, good friends of mine, so it's not going to be a very neutral interview. We're looking at Robert and David. Tell us how this entire thing came to be.
This is how everything happened.
How everything happened.
Okay, it's a really crazy story.
Tell us.
How it happened is, one day I had like a really massive argument within the church about how our youth is like, we could do so much more, we have so much potential, but we don't do anything. We sit and we talk about problems and we never find solutions to anything. And I remember me having this conversation with one of my friends, and then I came home that day and I opened up my laptop to play a video game on my laptop, yeah? and I put it on my bed. And then, you know, Robert's, his habit is that he always comes in the room, he gets his phone out of his pocket and he throws it onto the bed, okay? This time he totally missed and he threw it onto my screen. My screen shattered. The computer is in pieces, yeah? It was a fragile laptop, okay? The computer is in pieces, and I was really angry at Robert, of course. So what happened is, I took his old computer, and I opened up and I used it as my work. I used it during college. And of course, one of the things I like to do is, I like to know my computer. So I went through the documents and I was looking different documents, and suddenly I find a document called Adventist Identity. And I was like, ooh, what is this? And I clicked on it and I read that there is an idea of an event that could happen because of this, and how could happen. Yeah, how the event can happen, and it was really fascinating for me, because I was like, this is exactly what I talked about with my friends. Like, we don't do anything, and this is like an amazing way how to like achieve achieve what exactly this Adventist identity, and to bring this more to the surface. And so I started to read more about it, and I started to think about it more, and then I made a decision. I'm going to create a proposal, a proper professional proposal to make this event happen. Why do we need this? Is it going to be beneficial? How am I going to make this? And it took, of course, a lot of time to come up with the plans and the ways and how to do the things. But then at the end, I created the proposal. The proposal was accepted, and the rest was just, you know, persistence and work to get everything done in time, to organize the whole thing, to get the speaker, everything being done, and well, thankfully everything happened.
You are not saved by reciting doctrines of Christ. You're saved by relationship that you have with Christ. So truth is much more. It's a lived reality. It's a person. Jesus himself says, my words are truth. He says that in John chapter 8 verse 32. But then later in chapter 14 in verse 6 he says, but I am the truth. So Jesus, a person, is the truth. He still exists. So truth cannot be condensed to only statements. Yes, statements points to the truth, but the truth is Jesus himself.
If we are open to the leading of God in our lives as individuals, if we are open to God continuing to shape and mold us through some of these things that we spoke about earlier on, I believe our churches will feel it. Other people will see it. Because God works in us, and therefore God will work through us out there. So I am really not so worried about the Seventh-day Adventist Church and its identity. I am very much concerned, however, about your identity. Because the church will be dependent on you and me.
And Apostle Paul in chapter 3, Ephesians says, and now the secret from the early centuries, from the creation, is revealed to me. What is the secret? That it is through the church that God's manifold wisdom will be revealed to the principalities and authorities in the universe. Means the church is not only a messenger to the message, but church itself becomes the message. When people look at us, broken people loving each other, they know, wow, there is something more than human present among them.
You haven't been remarkably stressed, at least not externally, but I know that you haven't been sleeping a whole lot over the past weeks. Do you think it's been worth and I mean, I know that you started planning this. The intense planning has been going on for about 9 months now, if I remember correctly. So, has it been worth it? It's 3 days now. 3 days, 9 months of hard work.
You know, at the end of the whole event, and even after like talks, when people come to you and say like, this really helped me because I really needed this, like even if one person comes to me, that's worth all the money, all the time, and all the energy to do this, because I think that's one thing that we should strive for, is to get people, and multiple people came up to me, and that's even better, you know, multiple people came up to me and they're like, thank you, David, we really needed this, and it was really beneficial for us. And I was just like, yes, like this is exactly what all the hard work was put into, so that some people, or many, or even just one people can go home with the fact that yes, I want this, and I want to live like this, and I want this more.
What is described by the Apostle Paul when he says, therefore from now on, we know nobody according to the flesh or according to their natural carnality. Listen. If I know that I'm innocent before God, now I can let you be innocent before me. But if there is condemnation in my picture of God toward me, I only have condemnation to offer you. Everybody who lives under guilt will have an enemy on their hands. You will find somebody to be angry with. You will find somebody to hate. You will find some system, political party, some person, some family. You will find somebody to condemn, to judge, to hate. Or you will become innocent in God's eyes and let him love you, and you will begin to love others in ways you never thought possible.
Well, you know, as David said, it started with an idea, and then it started this vision of students and us youth who go to university and go to church, and we are missing this. And this is not over, because it's still going on, and this was just a small speck in the history of the Adventist identity, and I completely believe that. And what we're going to do now is we are going to create help for other countries to be able to create their own Adventist identity conferences, because this is needed. So what we're going to do is, you know, create material, pass over the branding, help them find speakers. So if people are interested, they can come to us, and we are more than happy to help. You know, this is not a monopoly on this event. We want this event popping up in every country all over the world, because this is needed.
Sounds like McDonald's.
Yeah, it is. We are franchising Adventist identity out. Yeah.
Our quest and our invitation for the future is to continue this exploration. There is a promise that much more will be discovered, and I hope this will become one of the priorities of Adventist Identity Conference, not only to reaffirm us, yes, you're right, somebody to pat you on your shoulder, you're doing well, just continue, No, this is the opportunity for us to search the Bible together, to challenge our assumptions, our ideas, our favorite, assumptions about reality, and to ask the question, is this true or not? Can we go deeper? How do we go deeper as a group? And this is my vision for Adventism in the future. Let us be a pilgrim community that is always in motion, on the journey towards the fuller truth, constantly progressing in its knowledge of God. Let our path be like the light of the dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day.
Content-wise, we've just spent 3 days trying to pin down what Adventist identity is about and should be about, and should not be about, maybe. Do you believe that there is really a need to discuss this all the time, every year? Do you think there will be enough material to cover?
Well, what I think is what we are going to focus now. We had an overview of what Adventist identity is, what should be our focus. Now what we're going to do is yearly break it down into issues and dilemmas that keep popping up.
Essentially what they're discovering is that righteousness by faith is the highest form of healing psychology. This is what they're discovering. Martin Luther describes his human experience. He says, I'll tell you what it was like for me. My situation was that although an impeccable monk, I stood before God as a sinner troubled in conscience. That's a psychological phenomenon of guilt and shame. Guilt and shame attacks the immune system. So it's no wonder that if you read biographies on Luther, he had a very compromised physical health. But check this out. He says, I was troubled in conscience, and I had no confidence that my merit would appease God. So a lack of confidence, which is a mental framework. Are you tracking with me, or am I alone tonight? Okay. A lack of confidence is a mental framework that compromises health and human flourishing. So then he says, listen, therefore, this is his response. He says, therefore, I did not love a just and angry God, but rather I hated God and I murmured against him. Luther was experiencing what I described in this very fancy illustration that I created. He was experiencing the shame, effort, failure cycle. It's a nasty cycle that feeds on itself. You feel shame and guilt for your sin. You try really hard to do something, whether it's short list legalism or long list legalism. There's conservative legalism and there's liberal legalism. It's all the same thing. Anything other than the gospel is legalism. And shame produces effort to try and measure up. But you don't measure up, and so your failure then reinforces your shame.
We will try to work together with different organizations to create even wider range of materials and online seminars and workshops that people can visit, even online, so that this is not like happens once a year and then you go home and nothing happens for the next year. We want to keep going and keep developing people's perceptions and people's identities so that they can become people with leadership in themselves so that they can pass it on to others as well.
Luther's torment was symptomatic of his distorted picture of God, and he was essentially an emotional atheist. I did not love God. Did you read that with me? I knew about God. I read some verses. I was religious, but I didn't love him. I didn't love God until Luther had an epiphany of the gospel. And this is from his commentary on Romans. He asks one of the most provocative questions you can ever ask. I want you to ask this question right now, just privately in your own mind. Just put yourself to the test right now. This question will peel back the layers of your soul. He says, listen, what would you do if there was no law to condemn or forbid anything? What if there were no 10 Commandments to say, do this, don't do that? Let me confront you with the fact that the 10 Commandments are a rather new development in universal history. Paul says it this way, the law was added because of sin, quote unquote. But the law, as love, always existed. It just took on this codified moral form at Sinai. Now check this out. If there was no law to forbid or command anything, what would you do, Luther says? And here's what he's getting at. He's saying, is there anything at the bottom of your heart for God? He's asking, if you didn't have to obey, would you? He says, would you with pleasure obey the law of love? Not from fear of punishment or hope of reward?
And almost like at the end of the sermon, the preaching, I almost cried. It was amazing. Encouraged me a lot, and I feel time to encourage to my friends. And also I want to bring back this topic.
So this is an illustration. So we remove heaven and hell off the table. Would you still follow Jesus? Which is simply to ask the question, is he beautiful enough for you in and of himself? Is his love food for your soul? Do you thrive and flourish on who he is? Father, I pray desperately before you, God, do everything you can to liberate our people from every vestige of legalism, and formalism, and coldness, and argumentation. Father, free us from looking down on anyone. Liberate us from our arrogance, our pride. Help us to see people the way you see us, dear God. Having received your love, Father, may we love others the way you have loved us. And let everybody who agrees say amen.
Tako da čitav dan je zamišljeno kao jedno zajedničko razmišljanje.
Koliko će da vezuje zajednicu vernika u jedno telo gdje se zajedno radujemo i zajedno plaćemo.
Zastanem i vidim kako Bog radi na njihovim srcima, to je onda znam koja je to čast.
Jedan deo ćemo zadržati za sebe, ali ćemo reći da smo dali sve, dobit ćemo aplauz, kao što su dobili aplauz drugi, doživjet ćemo poštovanje i to je bio problem.
Kaže, jučer sam bio pametan i zato sam želio da promijenim svijet. Danas sam mudar i zato menjam sebe.
So I live in denial with that silly suppression manifesting itself in all sorts of parts of my life. You are praying for forgiveness for not even naming those things. Because naming those things would make them tangible and you would actually need to do something. In this sinful reality, I will forever mess up. But at the same time, the knowledge that I am saved is empowering me to change something about the way I do life. Strive joyfully and hopefully instead of with anxiety.
Da znamo tačno u kom pravcu idemo i šta možemo konkretno uraditi.
They create movement.
Svako od vas razmislite da li hoće u couch akciju ili ove posete.
3, 2, 1, go.
Couch.
Couch.
Couch. Couch.